abuse when we're doing dealing with the whole issue of clinical work and dealing with abuse. That's the definition. It is a pattern of behavior to control and manipulate the other person. And that in itself is satanic, right? Because that was the person who wanted power and control. He was the person who wanted power and control. So if we're talking about real intimate marriage and family relations, whether it is the spouse or whether it is parent children, no, no. Power and manipulation and all of things to get our own way. And as rightly said, it is either my way or no other way. That is self.
Certainly, certainly.
Self has to be dethroned. That is self. That is selfism at its best, right? It is always about the other, the highest good about the other, because we are in this partnership. How can I relate to you in such a way that will keep your self worth, your individuality, all of these things intact. So it is not just the interaction, but what can happen to the other person if the interaction is not correct, how that other person can be affected. And if you are obsessed with yourself, you may not be able to see that, how your behavior or how your position is affecting the other person.
I think to some extent, uh, it it may have something to do with. I very much like what you have shared so far, and there's so much that we can bring from it. But in addition, some individuals do not quite understand the real definition of marriage. You see, we are not talking about two separate entities trying to fight or war against each other. We are talking about, and you use the word partnership, but the Bible specifically says they are no longer twain, they're no longer two, but one. So we're talking about a unit. Husband and wife come together to create something new, something that is bigger than the individual parts. And in order for this new thing to work, there needs to be this element of awareness, understanding that, hey, we are on the same team. Take two companies that amalgamate to become one. Sometimes you listen to the news and you hear of one company merging with another company, and they formed something. The workers don't adopt the attitude afterwards. Oh, I'm from this old company. I'm from that company. I'm not going to work together. If you don't work together, you're not going to have a marriage. And so it is important to appreciate and understand that it's a walking together, it's a journey that you are making, you're going the same road. Yes, you have your own individuality. You're going to have likes and dislikes. You do not change in terms of your personality, in terms of your temperament, but you learn to walk with your spouse down the same road. And the element of control, Pastor Adam so clearly said, is satanic. It's to be able to manipulate your partner is contrary to the will and purposes of God for your relationship. And I think it is important for us to appreciate that. Now, Pastor, I want us to go back a little bit to the whole concept. We're going back to origins again because, as we said earlier, that a lot of times what we observe growing up in our homes, we assume that that is the way. Now, some people overcompensate. So let's talk about the overcompensation first, because some people overcompensate. A young lady sees that her mother was abused by her father, and she resolved that if or when she gets married, that she would never allow her husband to control her. So she has a particular mindset. Now, thankfully, she gets married because some others determine that they would never get married. So she gets married, but she has this mindset. I'm not going to allow him to control me. And what we have there is that she is now misinterpreting his actions. He may be innocent, but she is so driven by the desire not to be controlled that she is actively looking and searching to see if his actions may have that ulterior motive
Yes.
of breaking her or of seeking to control her.
Yes, so we're not talking about over compensating because and that is why we say when we come into these unions, into these relationships, we have to be beautiful. We have to be what do young people say now? They have to be brutally honest
Yes.
of assessing whether my behavior, am I really over compensating just for the sake that I don't want to be controlled or to be manipulated, and when that might not have been the person's intent, because we said that I think about 2 3 other programs before, that sometimes the person might not even be conscious that their behavior is affecting you in XYD ways. And that's why we went back to talk about how important the matter of communication, because communication is part of conflict. When you are resolving conflict, you have to communicate, because it's, a conflict is really ensues when my needs is comes into conflict with your needs, or when both of us our needs are not being met or satisfied, and that's why we have to be very we have to be very mindful as to how we evaluate and before we take a certain course of action, because indeed the person might not have been the intent. They might be innocently behaving this way. So you can't overcompensate and say, oh, okay, I was just waiting for this and I'm going to take this stand. No, you have to be sure that is it a case where the person is not conscious, or is it intentionally this person is trying to control and to manipulate you. I think that point that you raised is so crucial, because we can just go on with that mindset and we are just poised, and so the relationship in itself is not healthy when that happens. Right.
Yeah,
Because
I think if I may just
might
come
not-
in here, Pastor, because, and I just want you to, for us to flesh this out a little bit, because it is really so very important. You mentioned communication, and I think what will help to avoid this overcompensation or this misjudgment, on the other hand, misinterpretation of the other individual's action, is to have this habit of talking and sharing freely. That I recommend to couples that they have a weekly review time. They sit down, they ask what about this week that inspired you from my actions, and on the contrary, what caused concerns. And if you have that sharing time as a couple, and you learn to develop the openness, the transparency of sharing deep down, and I like to say that is being intimate with one another, because you're opening up your heart and you're sharing your feelings. We like to say intimacy spelled intimacy, so you're sharing inside. When we do that and when we practice that, we will be able to understand genuinely one another.
Yeah, we just can't interpret the behavior as the person trying to control. That's why the communication is so important, right? Because they can just be not conscious that is happening. But if it's a case where the person is intentional about doing this, then you really have a problem. I would say that person now, because, and I want us to spend, because you don't actually have to be, because you see, when we talk about control, which is a part of the whole dynamics of abuse, you don't have to be physically hurt a person. You can destroy the personhood and and the humanity of somebody by just acting in those ways, in manipulative controlling ways. Because if this is a unity, if this is a union, a partnership that is built on intimacy, where there is caring and sharing, if you're in that kind of relationship, why would you want to dominate a person? It is no longer a caring, sharing relationship anymore. Once I'm going to take the position, I'm going to intentionally decide that I would dominate you. I must wear you down. I must depersonalize you. I must dehumanize you. all of these things, that is not caring, because the person, and let's go back to thing, a man must treat his spouse like his own self. So would you want somebody to dominate you in such a way? And we're using man in generic sense here, because both sides, you
Mhm.
have some women who are equally demanding and controlling as men are. So we have to be balanced, because sometimes folks say, okay, you only talk to the men, but what about women who might have that same disposition? Right? So we have to put a balance here. Either person can be the one who is seeking to dominate and control, and I've seen situations like those, right? and
It's a
and it could
little.
be that the person is indeed trying to overcompensate. So before you get an upper hand on me, I will start to dominate this relationship. Right? Yes.
I was just going to make the point that the woman as the controller is a little more common than we generally think, because there are some subtle ways that a woman may use to seek to control the spouse. For example, the man may have friends, and he may occasionally go out with the friends, and she says, no, I don't want that. And she says, oh, you don't like me, you're always out, and you never respond to my
Mm-hmm.
and she uses that methodology to get the husband to do exactly what she wants all the time. And so it's important for us to discuss this. Now, on the other hand, Pastor, there are times when, whether because of misogyny or otherwise, the man has this notion that he's the man of this house,
Mm-hmm.
he's going to give the orders, and his opinion is the opinion that counts always.
Yes.
So he has the last say all the time.
Yeah, and that's a problem with our socialization. I remember some time ago, well, not on this program, but I think we were talking on Let's Talk when I was on, and you asked me the exact question. We were talking to the same thing. Um, why, if men are socialized in that way to control, to have power, and I am not going to take anything from anybody, be it my spouse or whoever. So it is not nature, but how we were nurtured, you see. And that's why we keep going back to the family of origin. Do we nurture our boys who will become adults and take on the role of husband? Do we nurture them in such a way that they must be caring and compassionate and have these, because what these soft skills, but what society says, no, if you're a man, you have to be rough and tough and crude and don't take anything from anybody, right? It's the whole process of socialization, how we were nurtured. Is not nature, but nurture. And so we may continue to have this problem of power and control and fighting in relationships if we don't reflect and go back to the family of socialization, because it is there where the nurturing and the socialization takes place for both of the sexes, male and female, right? It is this here is a symptom of a deeper problem. You
Most
see.
definitely. And I think the discussion is important because we need cycle breakers. There are too many persons who perpetuate the bad
Mm-hmm.
foundation that their family of origin was built on. And we may say, okay, we're going to excuse it because that's all they know. So education is important, and that's one of the reasons why we're here. Husbands and wives have to recognize that in the home, while we're dealing with boundaries here, you have to instill in your children the whole matter of responsibility, responsible actions. You are preparing them for tomorrow. You are preparing them to take on responsibilities as husbands themselves or as wives themselves, as citizens who will live in a community where they will have to make important decisions. And if tomorrow is going to be better, you have to want for your children the ability to be able to intelligently make proper decisions, not just to carry on or to repeat something that they observe. So you now, as the parent, must make a conscious decision that, hey, listen, I was exposed to this, but that doesn't mean that that's the right way. I have to look at the biblical principles. What does God require? In 2025, how should a man treat a woman? We're talking here about freedom. We're talking about freedom because when you attempt to control somebody, what you're effectively doing is that you're denying them the God-given freedom with which they were created. And that's a violation of their human rights.
Yes, man. And in that sense, you yourself are not free.
Yes.
Right. You see. Um, and that's a biblical principle, right? You yourself are not free because there has to be some issues with the person who is seeking to control. So you yourself not free. But I'm glad take up the point that you're making. In other words, you are actually modeling how we treat with boundaries in relationships, and that we're not absolutely bound by our past, right? We are not absolutely bound by our past. Education, re-education could help us get over some things, and that is why it is important. Marriage is a work of a lifetime. So not because this particular experience I came from, it doesn't tie me for life, it doesn't bind me for life. I could choose that this is not what I want. I want to get off the bus and do differently, right? And so we're not absolutely bound by our past, but we want to make the point that when we see these behaviors are being manifested, we want to try to seek the origin and to give people the idea that, well, oh, if himself, this is my experience in the past. If I've seen a controlling father or a controlling mother, I know that this is not how relationships ought to function. That's not healthy. I don't want that. And that is why I do the history. Tell me the patterns. This pattern you have to break. That pattern you have to break. How did your parents treat with conflict? How did they do it? So if you see control, if you see manipulation, if you see all these things in your family of history, you know that you have work. You have to see in your relationship if there's any tinkling of that attitude that you are bringing this thing with you. Therefore, we have a lot of unpacking to do when we come together to see if we are bringing these things with us, and we have to get rid of them. And that sometimes it takes a personal intervention with you yourself. Check yourself out personally with a clinician, with a competent counselor to see if you are bringing any residue from the past that resembles what we're talking about here now, control and manipulation and all these things, right? So yes, we have to look at the big picture as we discuss this thing as families and even as society, because whatever is happening here has implications for the wider society. As you rightly said, some things are perpetuated.
Now, Pastor, you're tempting me to respond to so many things there. So I'm going to say two things. Number one, this is why it is so important for you, first, to begin with, to have premarital counseling before you get married. That preparation is important, and Pastor Adams exposed a few of the areas that are necessary because you are planning to live with somebody else, and that kind of work left on your own, a lot of people really do not take the time to do the background work that they're supposed to do, and a skillful counselor will guide you through those things. So it's important. You also, at the same time, recognize that when you get married, the preparation, as good as it may be, you have not lived together yet. You have not learned each other yet. So continuing seminars and education is important along the way. It's important for you, therefore, to avail yourselves of opportunities that present themselves along the way. Marriage counselors, we advocate very strongly. If your church has a marriage club, be a part of that marriage club. If you hear of a family life seminar, a marriage enrichment seminar, sign up for it, because these are things that will force you to consider things that you ordinarily may not consider. Now, I want to go back a little bit, Pastor, and we don't have enough time to digest this, but I wanted to go back to the element where you mentioned first that when you deny an individual their freedom, you yourself are not free. And you did make that point, and I wanted to follow up on that, because that is really very important. When you deny somebody their freedom, you yourself are not free.
Right.
We need to look at freedom from the perspective of not just being bogged down or tied down by a train. You know, look at the quality of your relationship. What kind of marriage do you want? You know, you want to be in a relationship where when, let's say, your workday ends, you are excited about going home to be with your spouse, because even if you had a challenging day at work, the presence of your spouse is going to be refreshing, is going to be exhilarating. And when you are controlling, you're not going to get that. You cannot get the best from a spouse who does not feel that they are free, because forced love is no love at all. And so if you are forcefully extracting a response from your spouse, you're not getting good quality. You yourself, in fact, that work that you're doing to try to get that response is labor. And that could have been avoided if you had allowed your spouse to be free. So in the process, you are endangering the quality of your relationship by seeking to control your spouse. You know, I mean, we can talk about this a lot, but I just wanted to share that, because somebody may have listened and, no, we have to wrap up now, Pastor, but somebody may have listened and thought to themselves, you know, how come you're not free if you're controlling somebody? Because that sounds like power, no?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I see our time has expired.
In loving relationship, spouses help each other, not hurt each other. Spouses help each other, not hurt each other. And that is what you want,
Yes.
right? So get rid of the control, help each other, but not hurt each other.
Well, friends, if you have questions, comments, or concerns, Marriage Encounter at slcadventist.org. That is Marriage Encounter at slcadventist.org. That's all the time we have for today. We will continue this discussion next week. And remember, we do have a repeat broadcast at 6:30 this Thursday and at 2 p.m. on Saturdays. God bless.